The medieval Christian philosopher Peter Abelard believed that he could give, using what he called similitudes or analogies, an explanation that would help Christians to better understand the mysterious concept of the Trinity. So the Trinity is the idea that there is one God who exists in three persons. And Abelard realizes right away that if you're trying to give a clear picture of the Trinity, you have to avoid two dangers. The danger of moving too much in one direction or the other. On the one hand, there's the danger of, well, I'll call it polytheism. And that is that in trying to explain the concept of the three persons, you end up positing three gods, which is more than one God. That is a violation of the idea of monotheism. It's polytheism. And of course, it is a Christian heresy. But on the other side, Abelard also realizes there is an opposite danger. And that danger in his time was called modalism. And modalism is simply the idea that you talk about one God, but you talk about one God as if he just has three different facets or modes. That's where the word modalism comes from. So think about it this way. You could say of me, Dinesh, that I am a husband, I am a father, and I am a filmmaker. Now that means those are my three modes, three sort of manifestations of who I am, but obviously I'm only one person. So there is a danger here. Abelard realizes that for God, if you say that God is one, but he just has three different manifestations or modes, then you're not doing justice to the fact that in Christian doctrine, there is one God, but there are also three distinct persons. You have to figure out a way, Abelard realizes, to account not just for the oneness of God, but also for the fact that you have three persons in God. So Abelard knows that he needs to put forward an idea, a way of understanding that includes the logic of sameness and the logic of differences. You have the same God, one God, who nevertheless subsists or exists in three different and distinct persons. Now, Abelard uses an analogy that I think brings this into very clear focus. He says, let's imagine a block of wax. And somebody comes along with let's say a signet ring or some kind of an impression, and they make an impression on the wax. And so what you have now is you have a waxen image. Abelard now asks a question, which is worth thinking about. He goes, when you come into the room and you see that on a table, how many things do you see? He goes, well, you see one thing. If you came into the room and you're making an inventory of things in the room, you wouldn't say, hey, I see one wax and I see one image. You'd just say, I see one waxen image. And so Abelard has accounted, if you will, now for the singular thing, the waxen image. That's the oneness of the thing. But now Abelard says, when you think about the wax and you think about the image, you realize that there are also two distinct things present there. There is the wax and there is the image. And how do you know that they're not the same? Because the things that you can say about the one are not true of the other. So let's say, for example, that the waxen image is made of wax, but the wax isn't made of wax. Let's say that you say that the wax has an image impressed on it, but you wouldn't say the waxen image has an image impressed on it. So Abelard realizes that because you can speak differently of the wax as compared to the image, or speak differently of the image as compared to the wax, you have two distinct things, even in the one thing. So here's where Abelard is getting at. He calls the fact of the oneness of things the essential sameness of the thing. It's essentially the same thing, the waxen image. He talks about the fact that you've got the wax and you've got the image as being differences in property. So the wax and the image have different properties. You can say things about the one that are not true about the other. And Abelard now applies this to God. And here's what he says. He says that God is one. God is one in the same way that the waxen image is one, but the three persons in God differ with regard to property. God is essentially the same, but the three persons in God differ with regard to property. And how do we know this? Because we can say things about the one person of the Trinity that you would not say about the other. What are those things? Well, says Abelard, let's look at the Son of God, the second person of the Trinity. The Son of God is begotten. But you wouldn't say that of the Father. The Father isn't begotten. Only the Son is begotten. So the Son, in that sense, has a different property than the Father. What about the Holy Spirit? Abelard said the Holy Spirit, now quoting, proceeds from the Father and the Son. So the Holy Spirit proceeds. And you would say that only of the Holy Spirit, not of the Son and not of the Father. So Abelard, by using this, very simple, everyday analogy that we can all understand, no big deal, but nevertheless is able to use this analogy to illuminate something that is a very big deal. And I want to I've been thinking in the Abelardian mode, and this is one of the great things about philosophy. It makes you think of your own way of thinking about these things. And I was talking to Debbie about this, and I said, well, here's my sort of Abelardism. And that is this. In trying to explain the logic of sameness and the logic of difference. Think, for example, about the chemical that we call H2O. Two molecules, two atoms of hydrogen and one atom of oxygen, and what do you have? Well, in the solid form, you have ice. In the liquid form, you have water. In the gaseous form, you have vapor, water vapor. Now think about it. When all those three things, ice and water and vapor, are essentially the same, they are H2O. Their chemical composition is identical. And yet they differ. They differ how? They differ in the exact Abelardian sense. They differ according to property. They have different properties. One subsists in the air. The other one is frozen. In fact, you can take ice and drop it into a bucket of water and the ice will float. So the ice, in other words, doesn't immediately become water. It is lighter than water. And so you have essential sameness, and at the same time, differences of property. And what Abelard is doing here is he is taking reason as far as he thinks it can go in order to help the human mind grasp the mystery of the Trinity.